Guys, how's it going? So my little co-host Claire is gonna be here. I'm sorry, she has to be here 24/7 with me. She's a lap cat. She's mommy's lap cat. And then I got Dilly over here, and I got my dog over there, and then I got my other cat over there. You should see me try and sleep at night. It's real fun. I've got three cats and a dog. Oh, you look so cute, Claire. Look. It's you. Hey, cool gamer. Hey, hi guy. Hey, Autistic. Hey, mama. Hey, Steve. Must be nice. She's on the pillow and everything. So that's why I probably look so far away. Sorry. That's just the only way I can really do it. She won't get off me. Hey, Great Dane. You're famous. You will engage in my PG-13 film. Oh my God. It's very windy out. I don't know. I didn't get like a weather warning this time that I can recall. I don't remember getting it, but apparently it's going to be a windy day. Night. Because it's about like almost an hour ago, it started getting really windy. My house is shaking. I was just like, huh, that's funny. Not. So of course all my recycling blew out all out front, so I, like an idiot, went out there in the wind chasing down a bunch of boxes of cereal and oh, stupid. Not me well, yeah, me chasing it, but also stupid wind. Hey Deb, everyone good tonight? Ugh. I'm still not 100% from yesterday. I don't know. My head's been bugging me. That's why I got this hat on. I have it so tight and so to hold my head. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like every time I start to get migraines and stuff, I need something like a belt just to like, ooh. I know how to explain it, but yeah, I have my head on. You ready, Claire? Hey, Heavenly Cow. You've had cold rain for the past couple of days. It may snow in my case. That snow that doesn't stay. Oh, okay. Trust me, our stuck. It's all over the place. I almost fell on my ass when I was trying to catch all the recycling. It was like slippery on my steps. Sorry, precious. Did I wake you up? All right, so we're on chapter 9 now, and this one is called Letter to Follow. So by the 10th day of banner headlines, the Black Dahlia murder had made a mountain of nickels for the Hearst newspapers. But after the inquest and exoneration of Red Manley, so that was the guy that she referred to as Red, and nobody could figure out who he was, well, they finally did. And he wasn't responsible for the murder. The Dahlia story began to wilt. Not that the public wasn't glued to every new facet of the case, but new clues and theories were beginning to. Seriously? Don't go on that. No. Yeah, go that way. Claire, you're on the laptop. Come on, man. Here, go over there with your sister. Sorry, get over there. Sorry. Not that the public wasn't new to every new facet of the case, but new clues and theories were becoming few and far between. When cornered by reporters of Central, Sergeant Harry Hansen was asked if he had any suspects, and in one of his rare interviews with the press, he uttered his favorite one word response: no. Hey, Patty. I'm doing all right tonight. A little sore, so I got my hat on. My eyes hurt, my nose hurts. I gotta turn this heat down. Sorry, I'll be right back. Hey, trio. Keep on down. But Donahue, who could wheedle out the blarney at the pop of a flashbulb, told the press that there was a whole new turn in the Dahlia case. So one says no, one says yes. Huh. We believe that the killer may have been a woman. I don't think I've heard that theory yet. Donahoe theorized Aggie Underwood. The murdered girl was known to have been in the city from January 9th to January 14th without her baggage and makeup kit. It seems logical that the short girl may have been staying with a woman where she could get a change of clothes. In support of this distaff murder theory, Donahoe advanced the possibility that the tortured girl body was severed after death by a diminutive female butcher who was too weak to lift the entire 123-pound torso, but yet, according to Donahue, was able to subdue her, tie her up, and place her in a bathtub where Dr. Newbar was convinced that she had been bisected. Hey, Sally. I don't think it was a woman either. I'm sorry, we just don't have the stomach for that thing. Not saying that guys always do, but to me it seems like the person who did this was hurt. Somehow hurt, even though I don't believe Elizabeth had anything really to do with this hurt. In his own mind, he was hurt and he wanted to make an example of that, which me kind of leads me to believe that or it was she crossed the line and the mob took care of it. I mean, and they used a doctor to do it, but then again, there's no more bodies or murders like this. So it just boggles my mind because I don't know. You were out to 2 p.m. with errands and paper signing, but I'm home now getting ready to watch Jeopardy with my son to see who was smarter. I actually kind of miss watching that show. Donahoe went on to recall to Eggie that three of the and Eggie is the Underwood, she's the female reporter. So Donahoe went on to recall Aggie that three of the most infamous mutilation killers in Los Angeles crime annals were women. Huh? Winnie Ruth Judd, Clara Phillips, and Louise Pete. I've never heard of any of these women. Have you guys? They were mutilation killers. Wow. I have never heard of them. Placing the focus on a woman as the killer intensifies the search for Beth's old roommate at the Hawthorne, Lynn Martin, who had mysteriously vanished on the day that the murder story broke. She had last been seen by her former Hawthorne boyfriend, Harold Costa, at about 5 p.m. on January 15th as she got into a taxicab near the corner of Sunset Boulevard, describing Lynn Martin as having a bitter dislike for Miss Short. Donahue considered her a hot suspect and disclosed to the press that an intense search was underway for Miss Martin, who was still missing despite an ever expanding check on her whereabouts. When your sister was in college, she worked at a sports bar. They would watch Jeopardy before the crowd came in, and then rerun came on about an hour later, and they placed bet. Smart people. Yeah, I guess who always won. After receiving an anonymous tip, the police took Miss Martin into custody at a North Hollywood hotel at 10822 Ventura Boulevard, where she had gone into hiding following the murder. Now you can go up. You can go. Get up there. There you go. So she went into hiding following the murder. Subject to a lengthy interrogation by Hanson and Brown at Central, it was learned that Miss Martin's real name was Norma Lee Meyer, a 16-year-old runaway from Long Beach. She was a wannabe nightclub singer/dancer who posed as a much older girl. Like Elizabeth, Lynn had been a B-girl, but she had fallen into the Tinseltown trap and became a prostitute at an early age. She had once lived at Gwen Wolfe's Chancellor Apartments on Cherokee before moving to Hawthorne and sharing a room with Elizabeth and Marjorie. Weed for need doesn't go. That sucks, great team. Get the decoder right. Lynn told the police that she had only shared a room with Elizabeth for a week or two and didn't know her very well. But then why would you run? Admitting there were times when they didn't get along, she said she had no particular feelings toward Elizabeth. Police located the other roommate, Marjorie, who had left Hollywood on October 22nd and returned to Cambridge, Massachusetts. Questioned about the bitter dislike Miss Martin may have had for Elizabeth, Marjorie said she was unaware of a dispute and denied Captain Donahue's allegations that there was any animosity between the two. I don't think so, Marjorie said. At least it didn't appear to me when I was still in Hollywood. The Examiner edition of Sunday, January 26, 1947 stated, figuring prominently in the inquiry in Lynn Martin, 16-year-old dancer and former roommate of the slain girl, on the basis of facts related by Miss Martin, juvenile officers have been conducting a sweeping investigation of certain nightclubs and bars in the Hollywood area and the men who pick up girls in them. Miss Martin, whose real name is Lynn Meyer, has provided lurid details of her associations with men who pick her up in various establishments in Hollywood. Among the men implicated by the girl are several prominent Hollywood personalities, authorities said. What the hell is that? Sounds like something's kind of trying to come through the damn roof. This house would never last in a tornado, ever. Although Lynn Martin may have been good for several days of news copy and fitted into Donahue's theory that the killer had been, in fact, a woman, Hanson and Brown knew that the 16-year-old had nothing to do with the crime. After discussions with medical examiner Dr. Frederick Newbar, Hanson had concluded the bisection of the body had been done with a medical instrument by somebody with advanced medical knowledge. In his 1949 testimony to grand jury investigator Frank Jemison, Hanson stated, so Hanson's this cop detective, basically the only one, not the only one, but the main one looking into this murder. What the hell is Delta 9? Oh, never mind. Duh. In his 1949 testimony to grand jury investigator Frank Jemison, Hansen stated, I think a medical man was involved, a very fine surgeon. I based that conclusion on the way the body was bisected. It was unusual in the sense that the point at which. What the hell is going on out there? Hold on, something. Leland, what is that? Oh, you scared the heck out of me. Sorry, it's my son playing an electric guitar without the amp, so it's like ting ting ting. It sounds like shit's dropping on the roof. It's aliens, probably. Hmm. Oh, I missed my. It was unusual in the sense that the point at which the body was bisected is, according to intimate medical men, the easiest point in the spinal column to sever between the second and third lumbar vertebrae. And he hit the spot exactly. Really? I'll put the picture in my community tab. According to Hansen, Dr. Newbar had concurred that the bisecting of the body was done with medical instruments by a trained surgeon. It was a fine piece of surgery, Newbar told Hansen, remarking that the surgery was meticulous and couldn't have been done in any 15 minutes, half hour, or even an hour. The FBI concurred with Dr. Newbar that Hansen's opinion. Having examined the autopsy photos along with Dr. Newbar's report, the FBI determined that the body had been bisected by someone with advanced medical knowledge. It just screams Jack the Ripper. I know it's not. It's the murderer had some training in dissection of bodies, the FBI report stated. It is felt that the murder was committed indoors where water, drainage facilities, and perhaps medical equipment was available. However, the knowledge that the bisection of the body was a fine piece of surgery accomplished by a trained surgeon was never made known to the public. These observations were only recently discovered in FBI documents and the district attorney's Black Dahlia files. That's why I like this book. It tells you everything. Yeah, it would have it was the body was drained of blood. It was bisected in a different location and dropped there for people to see. Maybe some deranged doctor needing to prove his theories and took it to the extreme. I don't know, right? Jack was 50 years old at the time, but he wasn't anywhere near there. It does kind of fit his MO, though. It is well known by homicide, contrary to Donahoe's public statement. He knew that Lynn Martin, a runaway high school dropout, did not have the medical knowledge or surgical experience to have committed the crime. Hansen suspected she may have known too much about Elizabeth's friends and connections and had vanished because she became frightened after seeing the headlines. While being held in custody in juvenile authorities, Lynn Martin was interviewed by the Herald Express and made some insightful and perhaps dangerous observations. Culled from her sad life as a young girl on the streets of Hollywood, Lynn Martin stated to the reporter, I don't understand how these reporters have basically more authority than police do. That's what it seems like. All those reporters are able to get evidence and they get to keep it, and the cops can't do anything about it. It's just very weird. I know it's a different time. It's not that long ago. I mean, the 1940s. I don't understand why reporters have more authority than the police do. They're hiding evidence, they're hiding facts, and that's okay. I know, right, Patty? I don't know. I want to know. I'm hoping by the time we get to the end of this book, we'll figure it out. All right, so Lynn Martin's statement was, there's a lot of girls in Hollywood who could end up like Beth Short. Wow. Hollywood draws them from all over the country. Hollywood is a lonely place when you come into it without home ties or friends and very little money. There are few places for a lonely girl to go except into a bar. Girls pick each other up in a store or a bar and start rooming together like old friends. It doesn't matter if they don't know anything about each other. It's somebody to talk to and share the rent with, like Beth and Marjorie and I. Sharing rent means more money for something to eat or a new pair of shoes. Even more important than food sometimes is having makeup and being able to keep your hair looking good. Because if you look good, you can always get a man to buy you a big thick steak, some french fried potatoes, and a cup of coffee. Nothing ever tastes so good at first, but the guys you pick up, I'll insist you order steak or chops, and you get sick of meat all the time, and after a while, you can hardly get it down. That's a really weird statement. You get so sick of meat, that's what they make you eat. I mean, yeah, maybe trio. It's just so hard. I mean, you can hardly get it down. You don't drink at first because you don't like the liquor. You don't like the taste, but you drink because when you're on a date in a bar, you have to order something. And when you're out on a date, the first thing is always a couple of drinks and then a couple of drinks. This is such a shady lifestyle. I could never live like that. Just not knowing where I'm going to end up, when my next meal is going to be. The fact that I have to sleep with a man to live for my next meal, for for somewhere for me to put my head down for one night. No, hell no. That uncertainty is freaking me out right now. Yeah, that too. Exactly, Patty. These are crazy stories, right? You're always lonely in Hollywood, even when you're out with people. Like, this is breaking my heart for this girl. So this is the one that ran away once she found out she was rooming with Elizabeth Short. When she found out that Elizabeth was murdered and the way she was murdered, she left. I mean, I don't blame her. I'd be scared shitless too. I would automatically think, oh my God, she's made an example of, or whatever her connections are, which I do believe. Well, we know they are with the mob, right? Oh, it just breaks my heart reading this because it's all these girls back then. It doesn't, I don't like that. It makes me sad for them. So you're always lonely in Hollywood, and when you're out with people, they don't belong to you. Those people, none of them really care what happens to you. Lots of times you can hardly stand the man you're with, but you can forget about that after a few drinks. That's like making my eyes water. I don't know. I feel so bad. That's so sad. Lots of time the girls talk to each other about getting into Hollywood and starting all over again. They're going back home or they're going to get married to someone. Down in the heart of all of them is sort of a hazy dream about a husband and a house and a baby. That's the thing. Like, all these women had dreams, all of them. They talk about it and they dream about it, but somehow they almost never do it. The life is like a drug. You can't give it up. It's not like having a 9 to 5. They can sleep late if they want. They're on their own time. And if they have family back home, they never want their families to know what kind of life they're leading. So if they write home, they make stuff up. Most of the girls are very pretty and innocent and well-meaning at first. The road downhill is gradual. They know their life isn't right, but after a while, you take the easiest way. Sooner or later, they become pregnant, and many of them resort to a legal operation, and sometimes some of them end up like Elizabeth Short. Wow. This girl's 16 years old. After the juvenile authorities returned Lynn Martin to her family in Long Beach, she once again disappeared and vanished for good. Perhaps she had painted too vivid a picture of the dead-end road Elizabeth had been traveling. There had never been a murder in Los Angeles with an MO like the Black Dahlia case. But Aggie Underwood's memory morgue recalled an unsolved murder that had some similarities in the murder of Georgette Bauerdorf. Georgette, who had been a volunteer at the Hollywood Canteen, along with Elizabeth Short in 1904, was the attractive young daughter of wealthy East Coast industrialist George Bauerdorf, a close friend of William Randolph Hearst. Her body had been discovered in the bathtub of her fashionable West Hollywood apartment on October 12, 1944, a little more than 2 years prior to Elizabeth's murder. Georgette had been assaulted, beaten, ard, and asphyxiated by a cloth forced into her throat. Her body had been placed in a bathtub, and the water had been turned on by the killer before he suddenly left the scene. Aggie featured the Georgette Bauerdorf case in the front page article she wrote for the Herald Express edition of January 13th, 1947. Under the subhead, Werewolves Leave Trail of Women Murder Victims in LA. She included the Bauerdorf case along with 7 other female victims of unsolved murders in recent Los Angeles history. The article raised the questions of competency with the LAPD in making the streets of Los Angeles safe for young women. 7. There had been a growing concern among the citizens of Los Angeles about the number of unsolved murders on the police ledger, and Donahoe and the sheriff's department made every effort to convince the populace that an all-out effort was being made to solve the murder of Elizabeth Short. More than 400 LAPD and sheriff's office officers were working the Black Dahlia case, knocking on doors, searching for witnesses, asking questions, and coming up empty-handed. Hey, Medina. Oh, I'm sorry. Alrighty, you have a good night, Benita. Administrative Vice Officer Vince Cutter observed, Miss Short's life in Hollywood seemed to follow a pattern. She didn't have any visible signs of employment. What's with this werewolf? I'm not getting it. She'd be broke and then suddenly have some money. Her roommates, the bartenders, and the hotel clerks all came up with the same story. She was secretive, never one to confide. She never said what she was really doing, or who she was really going out with, or where she was really going. Several of Elizabeth's girlfriends at Carlos Avenue and the Chancellor said there were days when she would disappear, Carter recalled. Each time she would be gone for a day or two after saying she was going to hitch a ride downtown to 6th Street. Upon her return, she was always loaded with money and would pay all her bills. We never knew where she went or where she got the money, one of the girls said. She didn't have a job and didn't act as if she was looking for work. She would often borrow money from her friends, but always paid it back later. I believe there was some acquaintances who knew her tragic story, like Lynn Martin, Ann Toth, Mark Hansen, and some of her roommates at the Chancellor, Carter said. But they were afraid to talk about it because it involved some powerful and dangerous people. The Dahlia case was very complex. It went way beyond the werewolf killer story reported in the newspapers, and Sergeant Harry Hansen knew a lot more than he ever confided to anybody, including Big Jack Donahue and Finis Brown. I don't get it. Werewolves leave trail of women murders in LA. You know what is going on? We call them sugar daddies now. Yeah. After the first week of blazing headlines, the Black Dahlia case seemed solved and was about to slip from the headlines to a spot beneath the fold. But a full moon rose over the city, and provided Richardson received a phone call from the crazed werewolf killer. Richardson recalled that on the evening of Thursday, January 24th, he was putting the next day's edition of the Examiner to bed when he answered the phone and heard a voice he'd never forget. Is this the city editor? The mysterious voice asked. Yes. What's your name, please? Richardson. Well, Mr. Richardson, I must congratulate you on the Examiner has done in the Black Dahlia case. Thank you, Richardson replied, wondering what the caller was getting at. You seem to have run out of material. That's right. Maybe I can be of some assistance, the caller said with a chuckle that sent a shiver up Richardson's spine. We need it, Richardson said. I'll tell you what I'll do, the caller said. I'll send you some of the things she had with her when she, shall we say, disappeared. Oh, that's scary. Richardson quickly scribbled, traced this call on a piece of paper, and flashed it in front of the secretary. What kind of things? Richardson asked. Oh, say her address book, her birth certificate, and a few other things she had in her handbag. When will I get them? Within the next day or so. See how far you can get with them. And now I must say goodbye. Wait a minute, Richmond said, trying to keep the mysterious caller on the line. But aren't you trying to trace this call? Richardson heard the caller say before the line went dead. At the time, Richardson didn't know what to make of the call, but he had every reason to believe it was actually from the killer. When an envelope postmarked January 24th, 1947, was sent to the examiner containing some of the contents known to be in Elizabeth's handbag when she vanished, including the claim stubs of her luggage checked up at Greyhound bus station on January 9th. Mailed at the main branch of the downtown post office and addressed to the Los Angeles Examiner and other Los Angeles papers, the envelope was somehow intercepted by the postal inspectors and opened at Central at the presence of Captain Donahue, reporters, and homicide detectives. Addressed with words cut from Hearst newspapers, there was a paste up note that read, "Here is Dahlia's belongings, letter to follow." That's this here. Um, I'll put a picture of it in the community tab. I feel better. Think she may not have been a very smart woman, like not able to work a regular job, and maybe she just didn't want to. Yeah, I don't know what else to think at this point. She had to survive somewhere. She wasn't really straight. Yeah. Included in the mysterious envelope, along with the Greyhound claim stubs, were Elizabeth's identification, her birth certificate, her social security card, her address book, the Matt Gordon obituary she always carried in her handbag, and business cards of several casual male acquaintances, including a man she had only recently met at the club in Mission Beach. Although the sender had soaked the envelope in gasoline to remove any residual fingerprints, the detectives found smudge prints, which were sent to a crime lab for examination but never publicly identified. Donahue stated to the press that the prints had been forwarded to the FBI. However, Elizabeth Short's FBI file had no record of the FBI ever receiving these prints. Of course not. They botched this case. It was assumed that only the killer could have pressed the contents of a handbag that Elizabeth was carrying when she was last seen alive. Richardson may have wondered if the contents were still inside Elizabeth's handbag when somebody tossed it in the incinerator near Pico and Crenshaw. And he may have wondered if the contents were still inside the handbag when the police found it at the city dump. But if it all seemed a little too providential, the anonymous phone call, the phenomenal envelope, and the mysterious note, it was one of those big once-in-a-lifetime news breaks, and the red button in the cavernous press room was waiting to be pushed. Among the contents of Elizabeth's purse that were found in the envelope was a brown address book in which she had written numerous names, addresses, and phone numbers. Upon examining the address book, Donahue was quoted saying, "This book is going to be dynamite." It was rumored that more than 75 names of prominent Angelenos and Hollywood personalities were listed on its pages. Donahue refused to divulge the names for fear of embarrassing persons not connected with the case, and the contents of Elizabeth's address book were never made public or allowed to be examined by reporters. Richardson learned that several names in the address had been deliberately cut out of the book at some point prior to its being placed in the envelope, leading some to suspect that the the names cut out may have been led to a killer. When it was discovered that the name of Mark Hansen of the Florentine Gardens was embossed in gold on the cover of the address book, Donahue momentarily forgot his staff theories and placed Mark Hansen high on his list of prime suspects. I can't see it on here. Thank you, Benita. We should watch that. Upon being shown the address book by detectives, Mark Hansen identified it as one that had once been sent to me from Denmark, my native country. He claimed it had been stolen from his desk about the time that Elizabeth moved out of his Carlos Street residence in October. There were no entries in the book, no names of any individuals. When I last saw it, Mark Hansen insisted. And police handwriting experts determined that all of the entries in the address book were written by Elizabeth Short. The alleged killer's message to the Examiner and Los Angeles newspapers, along with the comments of Elizabeth's handbag, had been a stroke of good fortune for Richardson. But lightning struck again on Monday, January 27th, when a second message was received. This message was sent exclusively to the Examiner on a postcard and was also mailed at the main post office in downtown Los Angeles. Can't even read what it says, but it's postcard. It says, here it is. Turning in Wednesday, January 29th, 10 a.m. Had my fun at police Black Dahlia Avenger. That's that guy's father. You have a good night, Benita. Yeah, definitely need the positivity. He's very positive trio. Oh yeah, always, all day, every day. We can't type today. Captain Donahue told the press that he believed the postcard message was legitimate and constituted the letter to follow promised by the killer. The fact that the postcard was written by hand rather than lettered with words cut out of the newspapers, Donahue reasoned, also supports the theory that the killer intends to turn himself in and no longer needs to take pains to conceal his identity. In a statement to the press, Donahue expressed optimism that the killer was indeed about to surrender. In signing the postcard, Black Dahlia Avenger, Donahue theorized that he is indicating that he murdered Elizabeth Short for some avenged wrong, either real or imagined. So far, we haven't seen any evidence of that, but we hope that the killer who was writing these notes keeps his promise to turn himself in on Wednesday. That didn't happen, I can imagine. The implication was that the killer was going to turn himself in to the Examiner. And as the day went by, Richardson and the city waited for the hour that the killer was to surrender. The Dahlia headlines and the public's fascination with the case reached a new high. In a message that Donahue publicly sent to the killer via a press release to the Los Angeles papers, he promised the killer, if you want to surrender as indicated by the postcard now in our hands, I will meet you at any public location, at any time, or at the homicide detail office at City Hall. Communicate immediately by telephone, extension 2521, or by mail. But if the killer had tried to call, he would have gotten a busy signal. The line was flooded with calls from crackpots and hoaxers. In his note to the Examiner, the Black Dahlia Avenger said he would surrender at 10 a.m. on January 29th by 9 a.m. that Wednesday morning. Donahue had posted detectives at all the examiner doors, wanting and waiting to nab the killer when he showed up. At the same time, reporters from other newspapers were sneaking into the Hearst building, hoping to beat the Examiner onto the street with the story. After chasing all the rival reporters out of the building, Richardson called Donahue. Get your boys away from here, he told Donahue. Nobody's going to turn themselves in with them standing there all eagle-eyed. If he comes, I promise I'll call you. All right, Donahue said, playing the game, but understand, I'm taking it out of there at once. No deal this time. You can't hide a murderer without getting yourself in real trouble. You know that, don't you? As the clock on the wall approached 10 a.m., Richardson took two of his little white pills and waited. Two little white pills? What does that mean? That morning, the city room was unusually quiet, Will Fowler remembered. I don't think any of us really believed the killer would show. There was always the outside chance that he would. Noon rolled by, and the Black Dahlia Avenger had not revealed himself. Richardson patiently waited by his phone in case he called. All that day, I had a king-size sweat. A king-size sweat? It's kind of funny. Just stuff that these scenes look funny. Yeah, maybe aspirin. I don't know. He took two of the little white pills and waited. Now he's got a king-size sweat. He sweated until midnight when the next day's edition had to be put to bed. Black Dahlia Avenger never showed before they had to press the red button and roll the presses up for the Thursday morning run. Richardson knew somebody had made a fool out of him, but he wasn't sure if it was the werewolf killer, some crackpot, or Big Jack Donahue. Yeah, like why mention that? Is this like the start of us knowing that this cop was on drugs? Or sorry, newspaper man was on drugs? Yeah, because Richardson, this guy worked at Gross Trio. All right, now we're on chapter 10. This one's titled Memory Morgue. So the writer for this, I think it's the Examiner, isn't it? Was sweating buckets. He had a king size sweat, took his little 2 white pills, waiting for the killer to show up, and that did not happen. All right. While Jim Richardson held little admiration for Jack Donahue and the upper echelons of the LAPD, he often played their game and ran with screaming headlines down dead end avenues. However, there were other avenues of investigation that never received an assignment from Richardson, and Will Fowler disclosed an intriguing backstory regarding Richardson, City Hall, William Randolph Hearst, and the Black Dahlia case. Richardson got his start in the newspaper business through his uncle, Fred Richardson, who had been a newspaper editor and protege of William Randolph Hearst before becoming the governor of California, 1923 to 1927. It was Governor Fred Richardson who had appointed Fletcher Bowron to the judge's bench prior to Bowron's run for mayor of Los Angeles in 1939, and the governor's nephew, Jim Richardson, had become a close friend of Bowron during the years with Jim Richardson had risen through the Hearst ranks to become the managing editor of the Examiner. According to Will Fowler, Jim Richardson had once been a fiercely independent Hearst reporter and editor before succumbing to the chronic newspaperman's disease, alcoholism. The chronic newspaperman's disease, it's alcoholism. Okay. I'm not laughing at the alcoholism part. I'm just laughing at the way they talk. It's funny. Anxiety meds? Yeah, maybe. In 1937, he had been fired by Hearst because of his drinking problem. After drying out, he worked for a period of time in the publicity department at Warner Brothers before his friend, Mayor Boron, intervened with Hearst and persuaded him to rehire Richardson with the proviso he would never drink again. Richardson never drank again, nor was he ever the same fiercely independent newsman again. He was beholden to Mayor Boron, and according to Will Fowler, there were avenues in the Black Dahlia case leading towards City Hall that Richardson knew would never be explored by the Examiner. Up until the Dahlia case, Aggie Underwood at the Herald Express had also managed to maintain her independence and integrity. Aggie's article concerning the many unsolved murders of young women in the city may have ruffled some bristles at City Hall, but she felt that was her calling. It was during her research on all the open murder files on the police ledger that Aggie recalled the link between the murder of Elizabeth Short and the murder of Georgette Bauerdorf. And it wasn't until Aggie culled the correlation between the two murders from the morgue that she, too, was maneuvered into silence and a compromise of her journalistic integrity. Really? Who the hell tried to silence her? When Aggie's article about the city's numerous unsolved murders of young women was disturbing to many Angelinos, it was particularly upsetting to Sam Wolfe, a close friend of my stepfather. Sam Wolfe, who was Jeff's attorney, as well as the attorney for Monogram Pictures, was Georgette's uncle and guardian. At the time of her murder, he had been called upon by the coroner to identify the body. Sam and his wife were frequent visitors to our home, and I can recall several grim conversations with about Georgette. Sam was deeply disturbed that authorities never found the killer, and when Aggie's article appeared, it brought back all the pain regarding the unsolved murder of his niece. Okay, but when you want the article out there anyways, because your niece's murder is unsolved? I mean, Georgette Bauerdorf and Elizabeth Short were both born in 1924, but Georgette had been born into a wealthy New York family and had lived on Park Avenue before moving to Los Angeles. And while Elizabeth had been waiting tables in Miami, Georgette had been a student at the Marlborough School and graduated from the elusive Westlake School for Girls in Bel Air in June 1942. Georgette's mother was Samuel's sister, Connie, and according to Sam, Georgette had been sent to private schools on the West Coast because she wasn't getting along with her parents. She was extremely independent, very social, and somewhat of a party girl. As her guardian, Sam paid her bills, supervised her education, and helped her find an apartment in the fashionable El Palacio at 8493 Fountain Avenue in West Hollywood, where her murder took place. Yeah, they got yeah, it was after. I wonder if the pictures they included with this article. I don't know. There's a couple things included, but not a whole lot this time. Through the years, the El Palacio, which stood on the corner of Fountain and La Cinerja, whatever Boulevard, had been the transitory home of a number of film stars and celebrities, including Joan Crawford, John Field, and Evelyn Keyes. Mafioso Johnny Rosalie became an Al Palacio resident after his release from prison in 1947, and his pal actor John Carroll was a tenant when he looked after Marilyn Monroe following the lapse of her initial contact at Fox. Because the apartment building was in West Hollywood and just outside the jurisdiction of the LAPD, the Bowerdorf murder investigation was handled by the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, which investigated West Hollywood homicides. Georgette's body was discovered by Mr. and Mrs. Charles Atwood, who were the building managers and lived next to her apartment. The Atwoods told detectives they had been awakened sometime after midnight on Wednesday, October 11th, 1944, by a commotion and what sounded like a crash of something metallic. The next morning, they found Georgette's door ajar and heard the sound of water running inside. Sorry. Miss Atwood knocked on the door, and when no one answered, she entered with her husband and found the apartment flooded with water pouring from the bathtub faucet. To their horror, they discovered Georgette's body submerged in the tub. When the detectives from the sheriff's department arrived, they determined that Georgette had been assaulted and Ard in the bedroom and died from asphyxiation. Bloodstains were found on the floor near the bed, along with the cut and torn bottom half of her pajamas, which had been sliced by a knife. Apparently, the killer had fled after placing the body in the bathtub and turning on the water. Because the water had been left running, detectives theorized, holy, theorized that the killer may have been frightened off by someone approaching the building. Georgette's neighbor, prominent Hollywood drama coach Stellar Adler, recalled that she had returned to her apartment sometime after midnight and noticed that Georgette's door was ajar. At the inquest, it was determined by medical examiner Frank Webb that Georgette's murder had taken place close to midnight, and the cause of death was obstruction of upper air passages by inserted cloth. Dr. Webb stated abrasions on the knuckles of the girl's hands showed she had fought desperately against the attacker. Thumb and finger marks on her face, lips, abdomen, and thighs indicated the attacker was powerful with almost ape-like hands. The victim had been asphyxiated prior to the time that the body had been placed in the bathtub. Sheriff's detectives found Georgette's handbag on the floor near the bedroom door, its contents strewn nearby. The car keys were missing, and her green Oldsmobile coupe, which she normally kept in the garage, was gone. 3 days later, Georgette's car was found, parked at the curb in front of 72 8 and a half Street. Holy, 72 8 and a half East 25th Street. I don't know. I've never heard anything except for this book and I guess on movies like Miracle on 34th Street or whatever. Do they have all these weird streets like 728 one and a half 25th Street is freaking like what? That's a lot. Yeah, maybe. Okay, so it was not far from the corner of 25th and San Pedro Street, south of downtown Los Angeles. The key had been left in the ignition, and sheriff investigators concluded that the car had been abandoned there by the killer. A neighborhood witness described seeing a tall man who walked with a limp get out of the car and head towards San Pedro Street. Georgette was last seen alive by coworkers when he left the Hollywood's canteen near Sunset and Wilcox at approximately 10:30 p.m. on the evening of Wednesday, October 11th, 1944. Like Elizabeth Short, she served as a junior hostess and would socialize and dance with servicemen on leave in the Hollywood area. Her friend June Ziegler, also a canteen volunteer, told sheriff detectives that she recalled Georgette dancing with a number of different servicemen that evening, as she usually did, but during the previous week, she had danced with an Army private, whom Georgette had found to be annoying and quite bothersome. June described the private as having a limp and standing well over 6 feet tall. Ziegler recalled the conversation she had with Georgette on the evening that the murder took place. She was seated in her car near the canteen when I arrived at about 6:30. She was knitting and appeared quite nervous. I climbed in the car and we talked for about 30 minutes before we went inside. She told me she was nervous and asked if I would spend the night with her. At the time, I did not pay much attention because I thought she was just nervous about a trip she had planned to visit her boyfriend Jerry in El Paso, which I knew she had kept a secret from everyone but myself. What? I didn't see no light fixture or read of something their light fixture. Okay, anyways. Apparently that same light fixture still hangs outside the door of Georgette's old apartment at 8493 Fountain Avenue. In November 2003, I stood on the spot where the killer stood when he unscrewed the bulb. Though I stand 6'1" and have long arms, I was 3 inches short of reaching the light bulb. I estimated that the killer must have been at least 6 inches tall, or 6'4". Sorry. Detectives found many fingerprints throughout the apartment as well as in Georgette's car. Prints were also found on a light bulb and a fixture above the entrance into Georgette's apartment. The bulb above the entryway had been unscrewed so that it could not be switched on, leaving the area outside the door in darkness. Investigators theorized the killer may have been recognizable to Georgette, so he unscrewed the bulb and stood in the dark to avoid recognition before forcing his entry once the door was open. The fixture was 8 feet above the till entryway and could only have been reached by a person well over 6 feet tall. The prints of the killer, however, were never identified. How? With today's forensic and stuff? I don't get it. There's Georgette. Hmm. Yeah, it'd be very hard to find. It was the body in the bathtub that compelled Aggie Underwood to pull the unsolved Bauerdorf case out of her memory morgue. She began to suspect that the Bauerdorf murder may have had a connection to the Black Dahlia case. Although the MO was quite different, there was that particular bathtub murder correlation, and Aggie had heard through her contacts in the sheriff's department that detectives have found and confiscated Georgette's diary, which documented that she had known Elizabeth Short when they were both working as volunteers at the Hollywood Canteen in September and October of 1944. According to Aggie's source, both Georgette and Elizabeth had been familiar with the Hollywood celebrity that they had met at the canteen. The celebrity, a well-known actor at the time, became a suspect in both the Bauerdorf murder and the Black Dahlia case and was brought in for questioning. Who? I hope they tell us. Although it was never mentioned by the sheriff's department, the LAPD, or the press, the actor was Arthur Lake, who was under contract to Columbia Pictures and played Dagwood Bumstead in the Blondie movies. Do you guys know the actor Arthur Lake? I don't even know what the Blondie movies are. Hollywood canteen records were checked by the sheriff's department, and a former hostess that had recalled that Arthur Lake socialized with both of the murdered girls. When Lake met with detectives from the sheriff's homicide division, he reluctantly told Detective Frank Esquivel that he may have talked to Elizabeth Short and Georgette in the canteen. Beyond that, he said he wouldn't be able to help their investigation. Dagwood looked at us straight in the face from one to the other, Esquivel recalled, and said he wanted to understand that his wife, Patricia, was the niece of Marion Davies, a close friend of William Randolph Hearst and George Bowerdorf, the murdered girl's father. Lake then said that any further questions would have to be handled through his attorneys. Sheriff's investigators believed that there was a link between the Bowerdorf murder and the Black Dahlia case, and that Arthur Lake should be questioned further, but Detective Esquivel told Aggie that the investigation into both cases has been blocked and that the local avenues of investigation were shut down. I wonder why. It's that cover up that you just said, trio. So investigations were shut down and both cases have been blocked. After Aggie wrote an article about the unsolved crimes involving the murder of Georgette Bowerdorf, Elizabeth Short, and a number of other young women, which appeared in the Herald Express on January 27, 1947, she began working on a story about the similarities between the Bowerdorf murder and the Black Dahlia case and the Arthur Lake connection. But before the article was completed, she was told by managing editor Lou Young to kill the story. And she was told that she was being pulled off the Dahlia case. Wow. Well, that's not suspicious at all, right? So she was onto something, I'm assuming. Why Aggie demanded to know. Why don't you want me to do the Bowerdorf Dahlia story? Because the boss said to kill it, Lou Young explained. The boss was William Randolph Hearst, and Aggie suspected that Hearst may have killed the story connecting the Bowerdorf and Dahlia murders because of his friendship with the Bowerdorf girl's father, who abhorred notoriety. But why was Aggie pulled off the Dahlia case? Whatever the reason, she was angry and considered taking her talents to another newspaper when she was suddenly promoted from reporter to city editor. They kicked the latter. It made my head spin, Aggie recalled. But did I want to be city editor of the Herald, or did I want to be a reporter with my thumb on a doorbell? No woman had ever been appointed city editor at a major metropolitan newspaper before, and Aggie found it difficult promotion to resist. What about the Bowerdorf case? She asked Lou Young. That is a word that's verbatim, Young replied. Verboten? I don't even know what that means. That is a word that's verboten, Young replied. We will not recognize the name anymore at the Herald. I decided that I wanted to be the city editor at the Herald, Aggie recalled, and she knew that acceptance of her promotion had to do with her silence. And she fucking took it. That's all I'd ever say about the Bowerdorf or the Dahlia case, Aggie said, but I lay awake many a night wondering if I did the right thing. No, you didn't. Aggie strongly suspected there was a connection between Arthur Lake and the murder of Georgette Bowerdorf and Elizabeth Short, though it would be years before she discovered exactly what the connection was or precisely why the boss had killed the Bowerdorf story and taken her off the Dahlia case. When Elizabeth Short's killer failed to show up at the Examiner at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, January 29th, the Black Dahlia case began running out of steam. Paste, paste up notes by the supposed killer continued to arrive at the Hearst papers, but Harry Hansen considered them to be hoaxes. I've only been on here for an hour. Feels longer. Dahlia Slayer fails to keep appointment. After examining the first four notes, Ray Pinker's crime lab determined they were sent by the same person, and Donahue dramatically stated, "We are dealing with a homicidal maniac who craves attention for his crime and may come forward in a bold and spectacular manner for his curtain call after he was wrung out the last drop of drama from his deed." Esteemed question document examiner Clark Sellers was hired by Jim Richardson to analyze the one handwritten note among the first four notes, and in Sellers' report to the examiner, he stated, "It was evident the writer took great pains to disguise his or her personality by printing instead of writing the message and by endevouring to appear illiterate. But the style and formation of the printed letters betrayed the writer as an educated person." According to Will Fowler, Jim Richardson privately concluded that the phone calls from the killer, the first four paste up notes, and the mailing of the contents of Elizabeth's purse had been contrived by Donahoe. Richardson suspected that Donahoe was covering up the murder. What? Which was connected to the mob and some big shot at City Hall. Fowler stated, but it was an avenue Richardson didn't pursue. It wasn't long before the press began receiving copycat paste ups from various crackpots. More than a dozen notes were sent to the Examiner and the Herald Express, each more ludicrous than the last. And it became difficult to discern between the first four notes and the suspicious paste ups that followed. In the meantime, the confessing Sam's continued lineup, and Donahue kept releasing his absurd headline grabbing pronouncements. On February 1st, 1947, Donahue stated, "It appears impossible that the short girl was murdered in the city. We are forced to this conclusion by the failure of anyone to report to a possible place where she was killed within the city limits. As she was slain in a house or a room or motel in the city, it seems impossible that some trace had not been reported or found. This leads us to the conclusion that she was killed outside the city. The killer could not have emerged from the car in clothing worn when the murder was committed and the body drained of blood. He could have been too easily detected, and stains would have attracted attention. Well, he could change his clothes. My hair is growing. Thought so, Patty. I'm like, I don't know. It's so thin, but at least it's growing. Yeah, right. I'll be right back. I gotta go to the Hey Joe, I gotta go to the phone booth. Just gonna pause this real quick. Where's how look at look? There it is. All right. So placing the murder outside the city got Donahue and the LAPD somewhat off the hook for not solving the horrendous crime and apprehending the homicidal maniac. Donahue would suddenly disclose various sites outside the city as suspected murder locations, only to abruptly eliminate them. It just sounds like a huge cover up and stupidity, pure stupidity. So that's why they did it. They said that, oh, yeah, she had been killed outside of the city, therefore they don't have to take the fall for not solving it. A virtual fountain of babble, Donahue kept floating out new theories about the murder, which he maintained may not have taken place in Los Angeles, may have been committed by a woman with lesbian tendencies. The hell? No, Claire, no. May have been committed by someone she knew, may not have been committed by someone she knew. This doesn't even make sense. Finis Brown recalled that Harry Hansen didn't mind Donahue babbling to the press as long as he didn't affect his own investigation. But Hansen didn't trust Donahue and felt he was deliberately manipulating the facts. Hansen suspected that the actual scene of the murder was somewhere near the site where Elizabeth Short's handbag and shoes had been discovered in the incinerator near Pico and Crenshaw, but Donahue seemed to go out of his way to dispel that notion. This is confusing. Sounds like interference by a mob friend for sure. Maybe, oh my God, who knows what this I know, right? Like, it's very unsettling. Red had positively identified the purse and the shoes found in the incinerator as those Elizabeth was wearing on January 9th, when he last saw her. However, several days after Red's positive ID, Donahue called in Elvira and Dorothy French from San Diego to identify the handbag and shoes. The Frenches said they weren't certain whether the items belonged to Elizabeth or not, and on January 28, 1947, Donahue sent out press release stating that the shoes and handbag recovered from the incinerator had not belonged to Miss Short after all, and that Red must have been mistaken. The fuck? Like, what now? This just confuses me. Yet, the last time the Frenches had seen Elizabeth was on January 8th, and they had not seen her or what she may have been wearing when Red dropped her off at the Blitmore the following day. So then they do not know if that's actually the contents of the purse or the shoes or whatever. You know what I mean? So they don't, in fact, know. The Frenches don't know. Although Harry Hansen had little respect for Captain Donahue, there was a corrupt element within the LAPD that held him in high regard. According to Vince Carter, it was well known by a number of officers in administrative vice that the upper echelons of the LAPD were receiving payoffs from the syndicate and that the payoffs had been arranged by the syndicate's operative at Central, Captain Jack Donahue. Well, imagine that. Yeah. The old line vice payoff from the mafia to corrupt police officials has tapered off after a new syndicate territorial vice map had been drawn up by Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky in the 30s. But when Captain Jack Donahue came into power in Central in 1945, he seized the opportunity to reorganize and juice up the vice take by key police officials, which included Chief Clements B. Horrell, Assistant Chief Joseph Reed, Captain William Burns of the Gangster Squad. As a vice take enforcer, Donahue did the dirty work and squeezed the juice that kept everybody happy except the honest cops who knew they'd never rise above the rank of sergeant and had to deal with the gangsters on the street as well as those within the LAPD, like Big Jack Donahue, as he was often called within the department. That is sick. Yeah, the dances and stuff in the military. Yeah, definitely precisely done and drained of blood. And according to Vince Carter, many officers and administrative vice know that Donahue was leading the press and the public regarding the fact of the Black Dahlia case, but they were afraid to come forward because of Donahue's underworld friends. That pisses me the fuck off. So, did we solve it then? I mean, the mob controlled everything. They were paid off from this asshole captain, Jack Donahue. Oh my God. Donahue, this captain, the cop, Donahue had a reputation as a killer. Oh my. And he was a close friend of another killer, Jack Dragna, who was Lucky Luciano's West Coast representative. This is messed up. How the hell? How? Why? Who? What? Like, somewhere along the way, Jack Dragna and Captain Jack Donahue became friends. Dragna had control over the narcotics business, and Donahue was an important contact. It was Dragna who introduced Donahue to Chicky Stein, Dragna's narcotics distributor in LA, and she and Donahue became quite close. Chicky was a beautiful Sicilian woman with dark brown eyes who was brought up in New York, who was brought up in a New York whorehouse. Wow. Yeah, here we go. Her mother had been one of Lucky Luciano's whorehouse madams. Chicky was introduced to Dragna by Luciano when she was in her early 20s. Luciano trusted her completely, and when Luciano was arrested by Thomas Dewey and Chicky's mother's prostitution business folded, Chicky came to Los Angeles as Luciano's West Coast heroin connection under Dragna's guidance. Donahue and Chicky became close friends, and he presented her with a gold medallion with the Christ crucifixion on one side and the Star of David on the other. Chicky wore this around her neck on a fine gold chain. On one occasion, she showed it to me, and Captain Jack Donahue's name was engraved on one side of the medallion. Chicky was as proud of it as it had been given to her by one of her mob bosses, which, in my opinion, was not too far off the mark. Part of Donahue's strategy is misleading the press and the public in the Black Dahlia case involved his references to Elizabeth Short as a suspected lesbian. Well, we all knew someone was messing with it, right? So of course it's him. A cop, a captain. Will Fowler and the Herald Express, reporter Bevo Means, were told by Donahue, underling, and a deputy coroner that Elizabeth couldn't have sex with men. What? Something in the autopsy indicated lesbian pathology, they were told. How does that make sense? It was a leak, well, Will Fowler recalled, and Bevo jumped on it, figuring if she couldn't have sex with guys, she was having sex with women. Following Donahue's calculated plant of the sensational, misleading information, a number of stories appeared in the newspapers indicating that the autopsy report established that Elizabeth had infantile sex organs and therefore could not have normal relationships with men. What the fudge? This misinformation, initiated by Donahue, has been promulgated by a number of journalists for more than 50 years. However, in a letter to Mary Pisios, who knew Elizabeth and was the author of Childhood Shadows, The Hidden Story of the Black Dahlia Murder, Will Fowler finally acknowledged on February 25th, 1988, that the disclosure of Elizabeth's inability to have sexual relationships with men was fiction. Fowler wrote, regarding my telling you Elizabeth Short had infantile sex organs, that is untrue and a ploy used to shock all of faint stomachs. But beyond shocking all of faint stomachs, this ploy was allied suspicion that Elizabeth may have been pregnant when she was murdered, as did the lesbian stories propagated by the press. Hearst reporter Sid Hughes was told to canvass all the known lesbian bars in the city in an effort to establish that Elizabeth was a person who consorted with the lesbian clientele, and prestigious author and writer Ben Hecht wrote a Dahlia article for the Herald Express in which he labeled Elizabeth a lesbian and maintained she was murdered by lesbian acquaintance. This is so far from the truth. This is crazy. The Hetched article, which appeared in the Herald Express on February 1st, 1947, was riddled with absurdity and relied largely on double talk and pseudo-scientific mumbo-jumbo. Hetched writes, the manner in which the Black Dahlia was done to death, befouled and butchered after expiring under diverse torture, bespeaks the looks, sex, height, weight, coloring, and even type of hair of the killer. It was a crime done by a lesbian and not intended to be a crime? How do you figure? The killing itself may well have been part of the didos to which the Black Dahlia had submitted herself. She too was the odd one, and because of her physical and grandeur and psychic makeup given to humoring the fancies of women, bringing in spurious pseudoscience, Hecht goes on to say that the killer was a woman who was a hyperthyroidic type of human with an overdeveloped thymus gland at work, driven into thyroidal storm by some great shock. Okay. Adding to his absurdities, Hatch proceeded to find faulty grammar and an indication that the killer was a female. Citing the handwritten note to the examiner in which the killer proclaimed, had my fun at the police, Hatch maintained that the killer's grammatical error in using at instead of with could only have been a female and an infantile one. An overdeveloped thyroid bespeaks the fanaticism. These little girls often say, give it at me. Well, yeah, I would imagine they planned it, or whoever this was planned on cutting her up, but to say it was supposed to be and not intended to be a crime, bullshit. Hatch then proceeded to provide a detailed description of the killer. She's a woman of 40. She is 5 feet 6 inches tall. She weighs 115 pounds. She is thin, almost gaunt. She has a rudimentary bosom. Her face is long and narrow. She has a receding chin. Her teeth slightly oversized. She has brown and very wavy hair. Her fingers are long, and she has large eyes, unusually large and arresting eyes. And she has a European accent as well. Curiously, it was a perfect cross-gender description of Maurice Clement. Though the Hatched article was a blatant con job, there was an odd postscript to his convoluted conclusion. After having his fun at the reader, Hatch changed gambits and negated everything he had previously said about the Dahlia case by tersely stating that the killer wasn't a woman, it was a man, and that he knew the killer's name and the psychology behind the killing, that he was unable to disclose a second version of the crime and its perpetrator, which I am unable to offer this or any other paper. This is fudged up. It was a non-conclusion to a very strange article. At the time, Hutch was one of the most highly paid writers in Hollywood, having written the screenplays of Scarface, Nothing Sacred, Wuthering Heights, Gone with the Wind, not credited, and Notorious. Well, then he can write a story, he can write lies, he can make shit up. Hutch had not written a crime story for a newspaper since his days as a Hearst crime reporter in Chicago back in the 20s, and he may have done the article with the lesbian allegation as a favor. He was a part of William Randolph Hearst, as well as Gene Vallier and his son, Examiner reporter William Randolph Fowler. He also palled around with Bugsy Siegel, Mickey Cohen, and the Brenda Allen Syndicate. Hecht may have been telling the truth when he stated that he knew the name of the killer and the psychology behind the killing. By the end of the third week of intense investigations, Donahue had to admit to the press that the police were stymied. They had no suspects, no leads, no clues, no witnesses, not even a murder site. The Black Dahlia case files were overflowing with false confessions, false leads, false suspects, false reports, but not one shred of real evidence. No lead had any conclusions, Finis Brown stated. Once we found something, it seemed to disappear in front of our eyes. Following any of the leads was like going down one-way streets with dead ends. Harry Hansen believed that in order to identify the killer in the Black Dahlia case, it was essential to know the victim, but it was difficult to know Elizabeth Short. She was a very private person who lived in her own dangerous dream world and was constantly on the phone, sorry, on the move to the next dream, the next guy, the next hotel, the next city. Nevertheless, Hansen was following his own leads and making progress with the case. I'm sorry, there's no way in hell this would ever got solved. Nobody can make progress with this case because everybody's lying and trying to cover it up, including police. All right, have a good night, Joe. He was a brilliant detective, a smart man, but a loner and an odd bird, Finnis said. He wasn't liked, not that he was disliked, he just wasn't liked. He was too removed and too above others in his own thinking and in his way of holding himself and his opinions about others and police work in general. One of Hansen's problems was that he was an honest cop, devoted to his calling. He always defended the force, yet had to deal with the corruption that surrounded him. He had an intense dislike for his boss, Big Jack Donahue, but kept his silence. The secret of the sealed autopsy established a motive in the pathological murder and provided avenues of investigation that Hansen believed Donahue and Gangster Squad were blocking. When Hansen discovered that Finnis was reporting everything he was investigating to the Gangster Squad, Commander Willie Burns, he began to suspect that Finnis was a Gangster Squad operative and they had a falling out. Hansen stopped confiding in Finnis and locked up his private Dahlia files. Hey, Dragon. Like, all I can do is shake my damn head. I mean, I was personally concerned that Harry kept saying he was going to yank the papers from the morgue, Finnis recalled. I said, Harry, you can't monkey with the coroner. He said I was a fine one to talk about ethics, and I was lucky I wasn't in jail or off the force. Then he laughed, but he was serious. Former reporter Chuck Cheathan, who covered the Black Dahlia case for the Long Beach Independent, recalled Harry Hansen was well liked by some and hated by others. I liked Harry. He wasn't on the take, not Hansen. Some people say they were all on the take. Some people say they were all on the take, the police. They all had their circles of people they protected, but not Harry. Straight as they come. At least there's one honest cop. Definitely, Patty. His partner, Finis Brown, that's another story. He was not an honest cop. The district attorney's Black Dahlia files confirmed that Harry Hansen's growing suspicion that Finis Brown was a secret operative of the gangster squad was correct. When Lieutenant Jemison called Gangster Squad Officer Sergeant Conwell Keller to testify before the 1949 grand jury, Keller testified. So Jemison says, now, you were in the record division of intelligence during part of this time. Keller, in the gangster squad. Jemison, did you not, as such, have something to do with the use, delivery of filing of the records in connection with the investigation to the death of Elizabeth Short? Keller, yes, I did. Oh, wow. Jemison, what did you do in that particular? To whom did you report, and what did you do with your reports? Keller, well, in the office, we try to keep the reports together. In other words, to keep the complete file going all the time on the case. Jemison, was that while you were in Gangster Squad? Keller, that is correct. Jemison, Gangster Squad, they had their own files? Keller, we did at the time. Now it's in intelligence files. Jemison, we understand. To your knowledge, was there also a file kept in homicide? Keller, I never seen that file. I have heard of it. Jemison, did you cooperate with any members of homicide in your investigation? Keller says, we had Sergeant Brown, who's assigned to, well, he was assigned to our detail, evidently working with us. He was in our office during our investigations. Although Hansen discovered that Finis and Donahue were in the league with the gangster squad in derailing the Black Dahlia case, he continued pursuing his own avenues of investigation, and he had begun deciphering the silent scream. Harry Hansen knew that a man with advanced medical knowledge and methodically bisected the body. He knew the approximate location of the murder site. He knew the dark secret of the autopsy. He knew that there had been more than one person in attendance at the sacred setting, and he suspected that one of them was the short, dark-complexioned man who drove the old black Ford sedan, Brenda Allen's procurer, Maurice Clement. I'm going to stop there and I'll upload these photos. There's quite a few. There's an article in there, so you'll have to zoom in on it into your screen because it's small. Like really small. Sorry. See how small it is? But I'll put it in the community tab and you guys can read it if you want. This is crazy, eh? Unbelievable. So the police botched the case on purpose because they're on the take. They get paid for doing that from the mob. Wow. I'm obsessed with iced tea. You made sausages? Yummy. Yeah, I'm kind of hungry. Not like starving, but I kind of want to munch on something. What do you got? You can have them. They aren't old. Yeah, unfreaking believable. They're not old. I just got them like a month ago. They're good, I swear. This story gets worse and worse about the investigation and idiots in charge. That's why I think, I don't know, by the time we're done with this book, I don't even know if we're going to have any answers or if we're just going to be more apt up. I mean, we already assumed like that it was a cover up, it was botched. The mob was involved. Like you got Lucky Luciano, you got Bugsy Siegel. I mean, Bugsy Luciano. That's some pretty top mob people there.
Hey, Mom.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
I don't know. I just can't believe that they admitted it. So it went to court and they admitted it. Her black book had few missing pages. Yeah, that's what I was just reading, Dragon. Before Yeah, before you came in, I was just reading that. Yeah. They had a few missing pages. So they're saying, which I mean, to me, it's only common sense that probably had the killer's name and address on it. That's why they were ripped out. And the police are on the take, so therefore they covered it up. And they're saying that this captain, the one who's in charge of this Black Dahlia case, is in fact a killer, and he's helping covering it up. I mean, that's messed up. I don't know. I can't stop shaking my head. I'm just like in awe of this. It's crazy. All right. Before I shake my head off my body, I'm going to get off of here, but I will be back tomorrow. Um, tomorrow. Yeah, she probably wants. Can you grab her food in the fridge, the one with the green lid, and just put her in your room? Don't let that her. Yeah. Thank you. Tomorrow. Wait, tomorrow's Friday already. Yeah. Oh yeah. So tomorrow, I can't remember what we were gonna watch. Oh yeah, the Robert Pickton documentary. Yeehaw! All right, I'll be back tomorrow at 7 p.m. Oh crap, they're all running. Okay, yeah, I gotta go. I gotta feed Claire. All right, you guys have a good night.